Welcome to First Alarm Family First, episode 37. I'm Jen Herrera alongside Carolyn Acosta. And Carolyn, some people we just vibe with, and I feel like that's the case with our next guest.
Yes, today we're joined by Sam and Vania Simon, founders of Minding the Gap, a mental health service focused on first responders and their families. Sam is a former police officer and certified peer recovery specialist. Vania is a licensed mental health therapist. Together, they're using their personal and professional experience to support those affected by trauma and stress in the first responder world. Thank you guys for being with us today. Let's get started. Minding the Gap actually started how?
That's you.
So Minding the Gap, I've been in practice. I've been a therapist for over 16 years. Had a private mental health clinic, and then sold it about a year ago, and started Minding the Gap. We actually had a client when I was transitioning that I said, "Oh, I don't know what to name my office," and they're like, "Minding the Gap," because we talk a lot about the space in between where you are standing and where you actually want to be. And that's that mind the gap kind of thing. It's a Brene Brown. And she said, "Well, mind the gap." And I said, "Well, that's it. Minding the Gap will be the name of our space." So our focus is about post-traumatic growth, and we work with PTSD. Mostly we're just having this conversation before signing on CPTSD, which is the idea of complex or cumulative trauma that adds on over a period of time, which is very different and treated differently than we do a single incident PTSD. So that's who we are.
I just want to make a little note. Sam is a current police officer. Because Sam, I saw your reaction, right?
Not former yet. Almost.
But I think that's very telling. And I chuckled, but I like it because there is a pride, isn't there? More so when there are first responder roles. Like, hold on a second, I'm still doing this.
Well, and the irony of all of that is, so I do peer support, and people get my phone number, like, "Hey, I need to talk to somebody." And I literally just spent an hour on the phone with a retired cop. And there's a huge problem with retired officers and first responders because they run into a lack of purpose. Travis Howes, he's a speaker on post-traumatic trauma and growth, was talking about your relevance after you retire is about 3 to 6 months. You have a shelf life of about 3 to 6 months. And I came across that also with another former Marine and excommunicated warrior book talking about, like, listen, after 3 to 6 months, your phone is not going to ring anymore.
Right.
You're no longer part of the team. You're no longer part of the brotherhood, sisterhood, whatever it may be.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I found this person. And that's where and literally right after we're done here, I'm going to be going back to do some stuff with that.
Yeah, it's needed.
Yeah. So you both come from two different backgrounds, right? Law enforcement and therapy. How does that dynamic approach work together?
Well, we often talk about, wouldn't it be great? We'll just have a little podcast of a cop and a therapist, because we get into all of these crazy conversations sometimes where he's like, and it all started with, "Oh, you wouldn't understand, you can't handle," and I don't understand. But and I'm like, "What are you talking about? I'm a trauma therapist. Mm-hmm. There's nothing you can say to me that I haven't already heard," and that's the truth from my end. But the way that we see things or we even approach things are very, very different. Our perspective is very, very different.
So how have you made it work? Because obviously you're making it work. You guys can you can tell watching you guys that you genuinely like one another, right? You're on the same page with things. So with that said, you're not going to have the same perspective because you're not seeing for yourself, right? The things that Sam sees when he's on shift. But how do you make that work as far as communicating and making sure that everybody's okay?
I think we actually are really good at communicating because we spent a half hour to an hour arguing about the difference between knowledge and wisdom this morning. Because I'm an FTO. I'm a field training officer. And when I get a rookie in the car, I explain to him, I go, knowledge comes from experience. And experience, well, that comes from fucking up. And wisdom is learning from other people's fuck-ups. And she's like, "Well, no, you get wisdom as well from experience." I'm like, and I'm like, "No, this is not how it works for me. This is."
And so he Googles it, like, to prove me wrong. So I got to tell you, as a nerd, I would always say, so I think that the first conversation we started to have about the differences in our perspectives is we were like, first responders don't have their own culture. And he's like, we absolutely have our own culture. And I think in 2020 and 2021, when that became really like a big issue of Blue Lives Matters and Black lives and all, and it's whose life, right? And it's like, well, it's Blue Lives, Red Line doesn't have a culture. You guys don't have your own culture. He's like, we absolutely do have our own culture. So to prove me wrong, he sent me data. That was one. I was like, okay, that's the sexiest thing you've ever done, to send me data.
No, it turns me on.
And so that's how we've gotten into this whole thing of, I'll prove to you that this is our thing.
And I'm also in the midst of, I'm at the halfway point of my master's in social work, so I can be a trauma clinician when I graduate.
That's great.
We do a lot of work with that. And we actually speak at some of my classes. The professors have asked us to come in and speak about police, first responder trauma, and coming from a trauma therapist and the family and everything that we go through together.
I love that. You guys have a workshop coming up soon, Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So June 13th, we have a workshop. We're offering, it's for clinicians that are interested in learning and becoming culturally competent in working with first responders, right? So here it is. You win that argument we had a long time ago, Sam, that there needs to be a culturally competent way to address working with first responders, mostly because working in this field and let's say 80% of my population is first responders, and in our population in our private practice, but there's not enough of us out there. But the other thing that we see is that we hear from a lot of people who say, well, I tried therapy once and they didn't get me. I didn't see where that was that went to something. I think that the way that we need to address as clinicians how we provide support for families, and I gotta tell you, I always say first responders and their families, and we'll list that on everything, because working with a first responder, maybe that's the identified patient, because look at this, doesn't he look like an identified patient? So he is like, his eye is twitching, so it seems like this is a problem. But
listen, this is no lie. We were at the Dali Museum, and I love Salvador Dali. I love his art. I love all that stuff. I got triggered up into such a way. She's like, what is wrong with you? And I'm like, nothing's wrong with me. I'm fine. And she's like, no, you're not. What do you need? I looked around and I go, I need to get the fuck outside.
Yeah.
I said, I'm on the verge of hitting somebody for no reason
and
at
I
all.
fed you.
Yeah, she fed me. She got me a soda, some pan con tomate, and
our son-in-law went and sat outside with him for support. They sat in a sunny, quiet place.
But what was it, Sam? What was
just
it?
the amount of people.
Yeah.
And people, like, because they had a lot of tourists, so personal space was not a thing for them. So, I could have used my therapy dog that passed away. I could have used her so bad that weekend.
Yeah.
I think we should point out, because we haven't mentioned it, not only are you guys doing amazing things, not only are you a first responder, but you're also someone who's been through it pretty much as far as you can go through it. Do you mind, Sam, sharing that story?
Well, which one?
I guess
you bought me a ship magnet sticker to go on my water bottle.
I guess I would say, what was your lowest point, and can you pinpoint what got?
Lowest point, 2018. I just did a video with Bleeding Blue and First Responder Christian Church, where I just mentioned briefly that in 2018 I attempted to take my life. I was hitting a bottle. My life turned into a country song. I was living in a trailer. My ex kept my dogs. I wasn't seeing my kids at all. And I got the phone calls, hey, you okay? Yeah, I'm great, man. I'm fine. Here's my bottle that's half empty that I bought the day before. My truck broke down. Like, my only mode of transportation that was paid off.
It really is
my
a country.
Credit was in the shitter. It was like, I was like, let's see how bad can we make this a little bit worse, and you make those kind of statements, and well, shit got real, and I decided to take out my handgun and put it to my head. and I held it there for a good half hour. And anyone that's held a gun will tell you that that's not a easy feat, holding a gun for a half hour in a position. I'm also, so parts of my other job are, I'm a crisis negotiator, and I just negotiated. I literally just kind of like negotiated with myself about my family, my kids. I know that suicide, even though it's not scientifically proven, but it can pass on to your children. Like, people that are children of suicide sometimes end up going that route as well. So I just negotiated with myself and put the gun in the holster and called for help.
It's ironic that, you know, and there could have been childhood traumas. I don't know. We can get into that, but like,
Every cop has aces.
but what got you to that point also saved you. Does that make sense? What got you with the gun at your head,
I
seeing what you
prayed for the
saw,
strength to pull the trigger.
but that also saved you because of your training.
Yeah,
Yes.
That's the
yeah.
irony there.
Well, it was a mix. So police officers and criminals, believe it or not, are not that far off in their statuses of adverse childhood experiences.
Mhm.
You heard me say ACEs a minute ago. There's 10 questions, and you'll see that first responders will answer about 3 to 4 in that level, as well as a decent portion of certain criminals, as well as military and other first responders.
So what do you think are some small, listen, this is, you know, when you said that about like the children and stuff like that, obviously I've thought about that myself too. I'm like, oh my God, my son, I hope he'd ever finds himself in that position, because obviously his dad took his life, and, you know, it's something so scary, right? That's my biggest fear, you know. But I think talking about this and, you know, bringing it up and having the conversation, and, you know, even in the conversation I have, obviously at his level at home too, I want him to know that, you know, that's not a solution. That's not what we do. That's not the right thing. He wasn't in the right state of mind. He thought he was doing us a favor, but that obviously wasn't, you know. And a lot, are you a very faithful person? Did you, that come into play at all, or?
I've always had faith in different ways.
Okay.
So I'm very open, and I talk, I get kind of like nudged here and there about talking about this very easily and openly. But I'm afraid that if you don't talk about it, you know, people are going to be, you know, there's the stigma. Fuck the stigma. Come here, I'll talk. I would teach this in officer wellness. I'd be like, the first words out of my mouth were, I held a gun to my head for a half hour praying for the strength to pull the trigger.
Mm-hmm.
I got the 12 semicolon 6.
Mm-hmm.
That was a movement that was started by Blue Health, which is, everyone's got your 6, who's got your 12? So people were like, oh, what's your 12? And I'm like, I'll say what it is. But, you know, if they start making smart ass comments, I just go ahead and let them go with it. Oh, that's so you always know it's 12 o'clock. Yeah, I know where my front's at.
Mm-hmm.
But it's, so you get your heart and your head. This is your 12. The semicolon stands for your story's not over. It's a symbol for suicide survivors. And when I got that tattoo, actually, one of our kids got the tattoo with me. And I'm like, you know what you're getting? And she was like, yeah, I know exactly what I'm getting. I'm like, all right. And we talked about it.
Talk about
Mm-hmm.
And I would tell you the same thing, to talk with your children.
Yes.
Because what happens is this, is for us, or at least in my perspective, was that we're so used to fixing everybody's problems. Like, we get called to fix everyone's problems. I can go over there and slap a Band-Aid on this, go over there, slap a Band-Aid on that, you know, talk somebody down, blah, 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 blah. But when it comes to us, if we can't come up with that solution, it's shit. You know what? I just want this to be over with. I just want the pain to be gone. I want the frustration to be gone. I want everyone to move on with their life. I'm sick of being everybody else's problem. I'm sick of being my own problem. And that's where I got to.
So the reason why it's not that there is a genetic gene that creates a suicidal ideation, right? Or that or that has a predisposition for suicidal ideation. When we talk about it is passed down, we talk about it in terms of how we attach, right? It's an internal family system. How we have mirroring cells. This is the cognitive therapist, right? We have mirroring cells. Monkey see, monkey do, right? We're Homo sapiens. And as a result, we learn to cope. How do we learn to cope? The truth is that we learn to cope the same way that our parents coped, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we're just picking it up. We'll learn something different as we go along, but when things get hard and our backs against the wall, our instinct is to go back to the first initial things, how we initially learned coping as children, right? So, you know how we're all in middle school and we say, I'm never going to be like my mother. And then you turn out to be exactly like your mother. That's kind of like the epitome of what that means. So what happens? We learn to physically, 80% of what we say is through nonverbal communication. So what are we learning? We're learning holding our breath. We're learning getting frustrated and keeping it in. We're learning not sharing. If I'm here to please everybody or save everyone or protect everyone, I gotta show up in a way that doesn't make my parents worry, doesn't make my family worry. I don't want to get in trouble for something. Right? I don't want to let someone down. And so we hold that thing that is frustrating. And eventually it becomes so frustrating and overwhelming that it gets us into a corner. Suicidal ideation is a brave part. It's the part of ourselves that is willing to do the unthinkable when we run out of options, right? So, what is the difference? How do we dismantle suicidal ideation? We talk about stuff. We talk about hard conversations and we say, hey, you okay? Are you thinking of hurting yourself? Are you how frustrated are you? I may not have words for it because when I become that frustrated, my childhood self may not have words. I didn't learn to have words. I learned to hold back, be nice, right? Sugar and spice and everything nice, right? And I always tell everybody we're debunking nice. Nice is a 4-letter word. It How are you feeling? Say the truth, express it. Don't worry, we can handle it, right? One of the things that I always say to first responders and their families is don't think that your partner can't hold that space. Like you may think, hey, I can't tell her or tell him what I'm going through because I don't want to bring that home. Who told you didn't bring that home? I feel it. He feels it. Our kids feel it. When he got hit by a car and he's in the hospital, and everybody ran to the hospital except the little one. My mom stayed with the little one. I came home, he was in intensive care, and I came home like a day and a half later to find our youngest sitting like this, rocking back and forth, looking at the TV, looking for information that everyone forgot to give him, right? Because everyone ran their own way and to figure things out, he was being taken care of, but he didn't know. He was creating a story in his head. When some days Sam comes home, and even from the moment that door closes, it's like, oh boy, right? We feel it. We see it in that breath. The jaw is locked. When they're sleeping, how do they sleep? Right? They nudge, they jump up. It's like, who do you think is sleeping next to you? You think that we're not holding that space? We're constantly, and that's not 12, right? In our house, we say it's not a 6 semicolon 12, it's 12 semicolon 6. I see you. Why am I not sharing that?
And there's going to be guys that watch this episode and hear me talking and hear Vanya and us talking, and they're going to be like, I never bring that shit home. He's just this. And listen, I'm going to tell you, I was teaching a class one time at the beach, and the guy's like, no, man. And I looked at him, I looked around the class and go, you guys, whoever knows him, let me know in a year if that's still true. Because right now, all he's doing is talking shit. He's full of shit. You can't experience some of the stuff that we experience and not bring it home. You know, I try to give her a warning. I'm like, hey, listen, this just happened. Like, I got shot at. I was sitting in my car, literally yesterday was the anniversary. 1 year anniversary. I was sending my daughter her birthday money, like, hey, happy birthday, here's the money, da 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 da. And all of a sudden, bah, bah, boom! What the hell? And there's a guy sitting there pointing a gun at my car, shooting. And I'm just like, hey guys, guess what? I'm having a bad day.
But don't you get it? Like, I'm not, like, I can understand why some people know that would scare the shit out of their wife because
they don't want to worry.
Yeah, like it's better that you say that, right?
But my level was up here. Like, I'm letting her know, like, hey, listen, this just happened. I'm going to be fucked up for the next 3 to 4 days.
Yeah.
Which is great. I think the communication part that you're saying is so key for us to not only know how to handle you guys when you get home, but, just to know just in general, like, listen, I was left in the dark. Alex was on air rescue. Obviously the calls are not great when you're on there. And he would just tell me, no, it was a rough night. No, I didn't sleep. I didn't know what he was in, what he did, life or death, who died. I didn't know any of that, but life still goes on when you get home. It's like, babe, I need you to do this. This broke. Our son needs to be taken to practice. He needs to go outside and you gotta, go hit with him. Not thinking, maybe this guy needs to decompress. And then again, they come to you and they're like, no, I don't like to bring it home. And you hear them talking to other guys. No, we don't bring it home.
Yeah.
I'm going to touch on that for 1 second. If we get shut down one time, there's a couple of videos I've seen on this, and I actually agree with it because that happened to me way back when with my ex. I came home one time and I said, okay, listen, well, that's part of your job. Okay, guess what I'm never going to do?
Yeah.
And I never opened up about it again. I ended up having an infant. My daughter was born with a cardiac issue. She nearly died at 9 months, or at birth, actually. She nearly died at birth. And she's fine now. She goes for her checkups. But she was about 9 months old, and I got dispatched to a 6 months old that was unresponsive. And I did CPR, we couldn't save. And they sent everybody home, and I refused to go home until I found out from the doctor. I had the fire lieutenant was a guy named Wilson. Not Wilson. It was W. I had known him for a good minute because he was in the area that I patrolled. He's like, why are you still here? And I'm like, I'm waiting to make sure that there's nothing else I could have done. And he goes in, he grabs the doc. Doc comes outside, and they sit me aside, and they're like, there is absolutely nothing you could have done to save this baby's life. This baby was way gone before you even got there. But it was, and because I said, hey, listen, at the time I called and said, hey, I'm on my way home. The A, B, and C happened. I got home and there was a honey-do list waiting for me. And I was like, I'm going to go outside. And then I kicked in some bad muscle memory of, let me pour myself a nice cocktail and go outside and deal with this in a way that I should not be dealing with it. And that's how, but if you get shut down one time, and this is one thing we have to explain to families, is like, you cannot shut them down. Let them, even, you don't have to hear the gruesome details of everything. And when we started dating, I looked at her and I go, hey, look, there's going to be some bad days where I'm not going to tell you what happened. And she looks at me, she goes, what am I, a fucking pussy? You got it. You want to hear it? You got it. And since then, been open communication since.
Vania, you talked about the generational stuff, the learned behaviors, right? Listening to Carolyn, what you were just saying, and Sam, what you were just saying. So I come from a family of firefighters. My father's retired Miami-Dade. My husband is Miami-Dade. My mom, and I'm not, nothing against, don't get mad, Krista, because my parents watch this. But I don't ever remember my mom asking my dad, how was your shift? I don't ever remember. No, until now, and Jason and I have been married 20 years, I never asked Jason, I would ask, how's your shift, but not paying attention to the moods, like you were saying, and there's some ragey moments that now looking back, I'm like, you must have had a bad night that night.
And it's a game changer when you actually talk about when you actually talk about it, when you become, and that's why I say, listen, families have to learn how to handle this. It's not just a firefighter or the cop or the EMS person that has this job, or the vet. The whole family has this job. And instead what we turn into is he's just being an asshole right now. Right. And so
he's grumpy or hungry.
Just grumpy, or leave him alone, or he needs that. Right. But that I think that then that comes along with that idea that I'm the problem in the family. Right. Okay, it must be me. If I check out, I'm doing everybody a favor, right? Because I'm the one that's a problem. And in reality, you're part of our family. One of the things that I started to notice, so as a trauma therapist, I teach people how to feel it in their body, stay with it. If you're uncomfortable, perfect. Let's talk about discomfort. But then what I noticed was that I was holding it. I was holding that breath. I was holding that silence. If he was feeling intense, or he was acting a little tense or whatever, I would hold it. And it didn't become a big issue until he got hit by the car. Because after that, we were talking to the people who are now multi-agency peer support or whatever. We were talking about different things. You had gone to a struggle well. And there was another officer, female officer, was sitting across from me. And everybody was just doing their thing, right? And talking and doing the first responder talk about gruesome stuff or whatever. And I'm sitting there and she just looked at me and she goes, "Are you okay? Have you been okay since that? I have been what, like 5 weeks since you've been shot or something? Or there's something else since you've been run over? I don't remember. But this was the first time somebody asked me if I was okay.
You were okay.
And I was holding my breath.
Yeah.
So, for some perspective on this, when I got ran over, I nearly died on the table 3 times. In front, and part of those times was in front of my daughter and my wife.
Oh my
So, like,
gosh.
they had to push them out of the trauma unit, and because I had an internal bleed and no one knew where it was coming from. And then they spun me on my ribs, which were cracked, and put a faja for my internal bleed, which they found was in my hip. But they had to put me in an MRI machine while my blood pressure was like 60/40 or something like that, and I was turning yellow and dying.
So for me,
That's what she witnessed.
that's what I'm witnessing. And I'm holding that spot. And I'm worried about the other kids and call and get everybody here or what happens next or I don't even know. But like about a year later, we were actually talking to someone in Tampa, Debbie Ortiz. She actually did a documentary called "Is There Something Going On at Home?" And she is the wife of a retired law enforcement officer from New York. And so she did this documentary. We were talking to her about the documentary, and we were doing it online, and she said, "Sam, can you leave the room?" And when Sam left the room, she asked me the same thing that Sean asked me. "Are you okay? You're holding your breath." But listen, I do this. I see about 8 people a day. And I'm a trauma therapist, so I focus on neurobiology and what the body is doing and how someone is storing it because they don't have the words to recognize even that this is happening. So, you know how many times I ask people, "Are you holding your breath? Why are you
Right.
holding it?" And I don't recognize that was happening. For me, that was so eye opening that there were things that I didn't want to say. Because what I didn't want to say, I didn't want to say the things that I was thinking about or worried about because I thought it's going to make it worse for him. So here we are. He's thinking he's just going to tell me things, right? And
Yeah.
I'm not telling him the things that I'm probably feeling about whatever I'm noticing because I'm thinking it'll make it worse when he has to go back up. I'm like, let me not even open that can of worms. And so I think that it would have been if I wouldn't have had that realization, I would have just kept holding it and kept holding it. And I do notice that I become a pain in the ass when he is being a jerk, right? And I'm like, "Man, you're being a jerk right now. What is happening this week? This week has been kind of a hectic week." And then the other day before yesterday, he goes, "Hey, it's the anniversary of when I got shot at in the car. It's the year." I have been avoiding thinking about this month because May and June is a shit magnet months, and I feel it, right? So trauma has a beginning, a middle, and an end. It's EMDR therapy, but we also have anniversaries of trauma.
Yeah.
And those things affect us. It brings up a memory. It brings up an unresolved issue, a situation that caused an injury. And so, do we take a moment to acknowledge that? The minute that you take a moment to acknowledge things like that, it changes the way that your nervous system is holding it. There's a release of tension, right? So how do we diminish all of these extreme things? Drinking, having affairs and not coming home, gambling, working extra, taking on every overtime that you can so you're not coming home pissed off or disconnecting. Do we not love the dissociated first responder? He's here.
That was
He's
me
really
the other
not
night,
here.
actually. I was on my way to work, and I was like, I was dissociated for a good 45 minutes before I left.
Yeah.
And I looked, and I came back in. I recognized it by the time I got to the elevator, and I walked back in, and I'm like, "Hey, I love you. I'm sorry I'm dissociated. I know that I am. I know that I'm zoned out a bit. I apologize. I didn't mean to let you feel like you were being ignored." And I gave her a kiss and went back to shift. Went to shift.
But were you dissociated after that?
No, but I was able because I was able to recognize it.
You don't need to put a person on trazodone. Not that there's anything wrong with the person that needs it, right? But if we begin to work on recognizing, so we think, "Oh, I don't want to go to therapy, or I don't want to talk, I don't want to do the shrink stuff, whatever." Like, dude, man, you just need to learn some tools that maybe some of us have. That would be a game changer. So
It's true. I mean, it's obviously not like a first responder trauma, but like I've had a traumatic moment when this all happened with Alex. And obviously it's the first year. So we're hitting like his birthday was just a week and a half ago. He would have been 50. That was a really heavy day for me. But I could tell, even days before I was very dissociated. Like you could be talking to me and I was there, but I wasn't there. Like nothing was, but I know that I have to sit in these feelings and I have to feel the feelings. So even if it's crying, whatever it is that I need to do, I need to do it. Like, because my son and I tend to stay busy. And I've noticed that that's the way we cope with our, loss is constantly doing stuff. But the days that we don't have, and it's usually when it's the holidays because nobody's working, is when we're like, ugh, it gets really, really sad for us. So I know that, again, I'm learning every day. I have to find something new that works for me. I go to therapy. He goes to therapy. Going to do the EMDR thing too, because I feel like we eventually need to do that. We're still not living at our home. We're going to go back, but I also need to get past that traumatic moment for me.
you saw that breath? You saw?
Awesome. Actually, the one thing, what's the tongue trick that you're like, where's your tongue sitting?
Where's your tongue sitting?
Like, I want to say her tongue was up on the roof of her mouth through the whole time I was talking. I look over and I see your face and I'm going, her tongue is sitting on the roof of her mouth.
What does that mean?
You're bracing for impact.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I feel like I've been bracing for impact since July 12th.
And what happens? Eventually something breaks. And if you keep bracing for impact, tensions break things.
Mm-hmm.
You can't spend your whole life in fight or flight because then you end up sitting there like, twitching a bit.
Yeah.
And that's you're braced for fight or flight right now. If she laughs a little bit with me because I do a peer support and it's I do peer support for first responders or anybody that really needs it. And they come in and she'll be like, okay, I'm gonna send you a therapist. I want them to sit in on your group. And she's like, why do you break every one of my therapists?
They come out crying, moles down their face. I'm like, why did you guys break? And they all, they come out so proud. They're like, we broke her. Even the guy there, but like anybody that I send in there.
And any of the guys that are coming to, or actually females that come to my group, we do the same. It's the same thing. They're like, wow, you got trauma. And we tell that to the therapist.
Why would a person do this job if they didn't have the trauma, right? So to go back to why we are adamant about training practitioners is that practitioners need to learn to sit. This trauma is thick. It's thick. It's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable for us too. This isn't talk therapy. We can't do just talk therapy. It's good to let it out. Mm-hmm. It's good for processing, but then we need to learn somatic skills, EFT, EMDR, right? It's got to be like a bag of goodies of things that will help wherever the person is. You meet the person where they are, right? And we cannot begin to think that we understand the impact that prolonged or chronic, complex trauma has had on those families. And again, I go back and I say families because a lot of times if a first responder comes, we start talking about that family system and we start talking about how they are collectively taking care of one another and sharing with one another. And guess what ends up happening? It's like, hey, where's your wife? Bring her in. Where's your husband? Bring him in, your partner. We have little kids that come into our center and you can tell when it's a first responder kid.
They handcuffed the squirrel. And there's even this, little internal fight. I had someone the other day, I'm like, oh, I have the first female firefighter doll. And so I'm like, oh, look. And she's like, I don't want that. Of course, her parents are a cop. And I don't want that. I'm going to be a cop. And I was like, boy, it even begins right here. It's all of that. So it's, there's something beautiful about starting this journey of working on our mental health and just being aware of, hey, something is happening as a result of this. You go to the gym, you go to the dentist, you wash your clothes, you take up, how many baths do you take after bad calls and wash things off? Are we washing
things off emotionally, and our families washing things off emotionally, so that we can really have the family that we deserve and the life we deserve. When one of the things that really started us having serious conversations about mental health and what it was doing to everybody was when he was in the FTLE, was asking questions. And of course, he was really non-responsive because his blood pressure was really low and all of that. And the guy literally shook him. He doesn't remember. I remember. The guy literally shook him and said, "Hey, don't go. If you die, the state wins."
That was one of my friends.
I have to tell you, that isn't fair to us as families.
Yeah.
Right? That the toll that this job does, and I'm proud that you do this job, but there's a toll that it takes, and we deserve to live out your retirement, for you to enjoy our grandchildren, to live out those moments. Those things are necessary for us as a family. And so sorry, you got to stick around. Right? And that conversation needs to be had, even if it's uncomfortable. Right? So our job is to do that. Even if we are going around making people uncomfortable. That's our job.
You know what? I think that you guys nailed it. The uncomfortable conversations need to take place. And I commend both of you for finding each other, first of all, because wow.
It's the best thing that's ever happened to me.
I can tell, like, you can see your love. I'm not kidding. You can just
Ask
see
her
it.
what her first interaction with me was, though.
Boy, I'm scared.
Like it's, go away. I don't want to. I literally looked at her and like, go away. I don't want to bother you. I don't want to be bothered.
I was serving him beer at a bar.
And you could tell Sam, you're meant to be here because, I mean, all these like life or death moments, but you're still here. It's because you're here for a reason.
Yes. Minding the Gap. Where can everybody follow you? How do they learn more about next week's event? Or not next week, next month.
June 13th event. They can find us at minding the gap at minding _ the gap.
We also work with Bleeding Blue.
We work with Bleeding Blue, so a lot of our stuff will just out there.
We'll be at the conference in July.
Can we plug our conference in July? I'm going to say something. The other day, I was like, it almost feels like your department has to send you to this conference. And I'm like, your department isn't going to send you to this conference. If you start coming to this conference, you're not going to take as much overtime, and you're not going to take all the off duties, and you're going to start talking about the things that bother you. And no offense to departments. I always say I'm not in law enforcement or whatever, so I'm a civilian. I can say whatever the hell I want. But if you get better, or if you don't have to even be broken, right? You have to just come and learn about something that you may not see it. It's creeping, just like cancer would be creeping, just like whatever, that can make your families better. And I would even say, don't come by yourself. Why don't you come with your family? If that conversation is difficult to begin, how do I begin the conversation at home? Well, you begin the conversation there in public when someone else is talking about it and they go, "Does that happen to you, babe?" "Yeah, it totally happens to me," right? Last year, our daughter came, Maddie, and she's sitting there bawling, and she cries every single time that he tells his story. And I'm like, why do you keep crying? You already know the story. But it's the impact that it has, right? It's like, this is her daddy, and it's happening, and it happens to him. And so, but it was great. It was the look in both of their face after the event, and the way they were looking at each other and the way you guys communicate has changed.
She calls me every day now.
Right. So it's, people say, oh, you got to have a problem in order to go to the first. No, the idea is that we start to talk about this stuff so it doesn't become the problem in the family. So
Yeah.
that's July 19th. And Bleeding Blue, you can follow them at Bleeding Blue, and there's plenty of ways to link. No underscore.
I'll put it in the show notes.
And we got Bleeding Blue Mental now, Bleeding Blue Mental Health. And then I guess we have, I don't know what the website's address is.
But you'll have a podcast soon, and you should.
Huh?
I said you'll have a podcast soon, and you should.
How about this? We just come on. You guys do the work. You can invite us on, and we'll come on talk.
Listen, we'll have you back. Thank you guys so much for joining us.
Whenever you want.
Thank you.
We remind everybody who watches, if you see something, if you just have a feeling that something's wrong, to sound the alarm.
Save a life.
Bye, guys.